Chosen one, you were never crazy. You were always ahead. This message is more than just a reminder. It's a revelation. For years, you've questioned yourself, wondering why the world didn't see what you saw, feel what you felt, or move with the same depth of intention and understanding. You carried visions, dreams, and a knowing that others called irrational or delusional. But the truth is this: you weren't out of touch. You were simply ahead of your time. To everyone watching this video, stay with us until the end, because every word you're about to hear is a mirror, a reflection of your journey, your pain, your power, and your purpose. If you feel this message in your heart, write your warmest wishes and the number 99 in the comments below. This is a chapter about wishes coming true and energizing the universe. And you are the magnet attracting everything that was always meant for you. You were misunderstood, not because you were broken, but because you were built differently. You weren't crazy. You were conscious. While others were chasing approval, you were searching for truth. While others were fitting in, you were standing out. And for that, you were judged, excluded, silenced. But deep down, you knew something the world hadn't yet caught up to. You knew what was coming. You felt what others dismissed. And now, it's all unfolding. There's a kind of pain that only the pioneers know. The ache of seeing things before they exist. The frustration of trying to explain what has no language yet. The loneliness of blazing a trail through unmapped terrain. That was your life. And still, you didn't give up, even when they laughed, even when they left, even when they labeled you. You stayed, you waited, you evolved. And now, the very things they once mocked are becoming mainstream. What they called unrealistic is now being praised as visionary. You had to walk alone so you could hear the call. You had to lose so you could let go. You had to break so you could rebuild, stronger, clearer, freer. Every piece of confusion was preparation. Every rejection was redirection. Every delay was divine alignment. And now, the universe is catching up to you. This is your era of validation, not from the world, but from within. You don't need the applause anymore because you finally understand who you are. You are the evidence that evolution exists in human form. You are the proof that it's possible to be both wildly intuitive and grounded in truth. You are the living prophecy, not because someone told you so, but because you became it. They said you were too sensitive, too intense, too much. But what they didn't understand is that you were tuned in. You felt more because you were meant to lead more. You saw further because you were meant to guide others. You dreamed bigger because you were sent here to shift reality. And now the timeline's emerging, and everything you've seen in your visions is becoming reality in your world. You were mocked for believing in things that couldn't be seen. But now, those very things are rising. Consciousness is expanding. People are awakening, and they're looking for someone who always knew. That someone is you. What you felt in your soul, even when logic said otherwise, was not madness. It was divine intelligence. What looked like isolation was sacred protection. What looked like chaos was higher order recalibration. The universe was never against you. It was rerouting everything around you so that when the time came, you would step forward without fear. And that time is now. You're no longer hidden. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer explaining. You're arriving. And you're bringing light, clarity, and confirmation with you. You're not just ahead anymore. The world is finally catching up. Do you remember those moments when you cried, not because you were weak, but because you were overwhelmed by the depth of what you felt inside? That wasn't fragility. That was power that had no outlet yet. You were never meant to conform. You were meant to transform. Every part of your journey was sacred, even the parts you tried to erase. You thought you were being buried, but you were being planted. Now you're rising, not to prove anything, but to live everything you always knew was possible. Your clarity is your crown. Your uniqueness is your weapon. And your past, that's your proof. They'll come back, not to apologize, but to understand. They'll ask how you knew. They'll want your insight, your guidance, your vision. Because now they see what you always saw. And you'll smile, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because this was never about revenge or recognition. This was about purpose. And your purpose is waking up the world. The beauty of being ahead is that you already understand what's coming. And now you don't need to rush or convince. You only need to be. Just your presence is disruptive. Just your existence is transformative. That's why they couldn't ignore you, even when they tried. You shook foundations with your silence. You broke systems just by being yourself. You were never asking for permission. You were modeling liberation. This isn't the time to shrink. This isn't the time to hide. This is the time to own it all. The past, the process, the power. The storms made you sharper. The solitude made you stronger. And now your soul is settled in its truth. So walk forward, not with explanation, but with embodiment. Speak, not to be heard, but to activate. Move, not to prove, but to align. The ones who once questioned you will now quote you. The ones who doubted you will now follow you. And the ones who ignored you will now need you. You are a force of remembrance, a mirror for the awakening, a catalyst for the future. And you no longer need to convince anyone. You only need to continue. Because you were never crazy. You were always ahead. You always knew there was more. More to life, more to your purpose, more to who you were created to be. But what you didn't know was how heavy more could feel when no one around you could see it. When your light made others uncomfortable. When your knowing made you the outsider. When your growth made people pull away instead of rise with you. But chosen one, that discomfort, that was your training. The weight you carried was never a burden. It was a blueprint. You weren't here to follow the footsteps of the world. You were here to carve new paths. The dreams you had that others couldn't understand were seeds from a higher realm. While others were building with what they could see, you were building with what you believed. And belief always precedes reality. That's why your manifestations are now catching fire. That's why everything is aligning, rapidly, accurately, undeniably. Because the world has finally reached the frequency you've been living on, in silence. You were operating in tomorrow, while others were busy surviving today. You were decoding energies, reading between the lines, trusting invisible forces, while the world obsessed over appearances. You were protecting what hadn't even arrived yet, nurturing visions no one could validate, preparing for a destiny that felt both enormous and inevitable. That's not madness. That's divine assignment. And now, your alignment is accelerating. Doors are opening not because you knocked harder, but because they were designed for your vibration. Opportunities are appearing not because you begged for them, but because they recognize your name in the spirit. You're not chasing, you're drawing. You're not convincing, you're commanding. And that shift, that's the reward for walking through fire without letting it turn you to ashes. You were always ahead, not because you were better, but because you were built for a higher dimension. You were wired for transformation. That's why you couldn't sit still in systems that were crumbling. That's why you couldn't settle for small talk in a world screaming for depth. That's why you never felt at home in the noise, because your home is in the knowing. You were sent here as a forerunner, to feel what others avoid, to carry truths that shake the earth, to awaken souls with your existence alone. And every time someone said, "You're too much," they were really saying, "I'm not ready for what you carry." But now, the world is ready. Now the shift is undeniable. Now your presence makes sense, even to those who once walked away. You've spent years holding space for people who never held space for you. You've poured love into conversations that were too shallow to hold your truth. You've watered gardens that were never meant to bloom. And all of it was training. Because now you're walking into rooms where your essence will be celebrated, not tolerated. You're being drawn into spaces that match your magnitude. You're connecting with souls who speak your frequency, who feel familiar, not because of shared pasts, but shared callings. This is what you've been waiting for, and it's here. You'll notice how easy it feels, not because life is suddenly without challenge, but because you've become so aligned that resistance no longer drains you. You're not trying to prove anymore. You're simply choosing. You're not explaining. You're embodying. And the universe is responding accordingly. This part of your life, it's where everything you sensed starts to show up. The people, the purpose, the provision, the peace, all of it, right on time. Not because you chased it, but because you trusted it. You kept walking even when you didn't know the way. And now, the way is unfolding beneath your every step. The voices that once told you to be realistic are now watching you redefine reality. The people who once distanced themselves because they didn't get you are now drawn to the very energy they couldn't comprehend. And your job, it's not to judge, it's to shine. Not for them, but because that's what you were born to do. You are no longer apologizing for your essence. You are no longer toning yourself down to make others comfortable. You are no longer carrying the weight of being misunderstood. That season is over. This new season is about being seen, fully, clearly, powerfully. You're not here to compete. You're here to reveal. You're not here to hustle. You're here to attract. You're not here to seek approval. You're here to own your presence. And everything you lost in the past, it's returning with interest. Everything that left your life, it made space for what you truly deserve. You were always the blueprint. You were always the prototype. You were always the reminder that there is another way. The universe didn't let you break because it needs what you bring. The collective shift we're experiencing right now, it's responding to people like you, people who held the vision even when the world went dark, people who didn't crumble, but instead became the flame. You are that flame. And soon, those who once doubted will call you a miracle. But you'll know better. You'll know that this was never sudden. This was sacred. This was never coincidence. This was coded. This was never luck. This was legacy, being fulfilled through you. You didn't stumble into this moment. You were sculpted by it, day by day, layer by layer, storm by storm. The pressure didn't destroy you. It refined you. The isolation didn't break you. It revealed you. The detours weren't delays. They were divine rerouting. Every moment that felt like a mistake was actually a masterstroke in the masterpiece you're now stepping into. The signs were always there. The synchronicities, the dreams, the moments where your heart whispered louder than logic. And even when you tried to walk away from the path, to fit in, to settle, to play small, life kept pushing you back into alignment. Because your soul signed a contract long before your mind knew the details. And now that contract is being fulfilled. You were always being led, not by society, not by expectations, but by something deeper, something ancient, something sacred. That's why you didn't fall for every distraction. That's why you couldn't sell your soul for comfort. That's why you stayed in the fire, not because you loved the pain, but because you felt the promise. And that promise is unfolding right now. Look around. The shift you sensed for years is becoming visible. The people are waking up. The systems are collapsing. The illusion is crumbling. And you're standing in clarity, in power, in readiness. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are prepared. This isn't the version of you that seeks validation. This is the version that walks in confirmation. This is the version that understands the cost of carrying light in a dark world and chooses to do it anyway, because you know now, your light doesn't make others uncomfortable. Their unhealed shadows do. And that's not your responsibility. You've outgrown the spaces that couldn't hold you. You've shed the skins that kept you safe but silent. You've mourned the versions of you that the world tried to kill, and you rose anyway. And now, your presence alone speaks volumes. You no longer need to explain. You are the explanation. This chapter of your life is not about trying to make others see. It's about seeing yourself clearly. It's about recognizing that every no was actually protection. Every closed door was divine orchestration. Every delay was a setup for something so accurate, so aligned, so deeply fulfilling. You'll wonder why you ever doubted. And that doubt, it's dissolving now, because the evidence is undeniable. You feel it in your body, the tingles, the energy, the surges of clarity. You hear it in the silence, the confirmations, the whispers, the inner knowing that won't quiet down anymore. You see it in your reality, how things that used to feel heavy now flow effortlessly, how what once drained you now feels foreign, how everything just clicks. That's the power of alignment. When you align with who you truly are, you stop chasing and start attracting. You stop explaining and start embodying. You stop surviving and start thriving. You become a portal for truth, a lighthouse for those still lost at sea. You don't need to rescue anyone. You just need to be. Because your being is the rescue. They'll come to you, not for saving, but for remembering. Not for advice, but for reflection. They'll see themselves in your light, and some will stay. Others will run. But none will forget you, because energy doesn't lie. And your energy, it's unforgettable, because you were never trying to be special. You just stopped pretending to be small. You embraced the truth of who you are. And that truth, it's magnetic, it's unstoppable, it's legendary. You were never crazy for dreaming bigger, for asking deeper questions, for breaking generational cycles, for saying no when everyone else said yes. You were rewriting reality with every decision, every boundary, every moment of bravery. And now the timeline has caught up to your vibration. You are the timeline shift. You are the disruption to the old system. You are the invitation into something higher. So, what do you do now? You rise without resistance. You walk without fear. You speak without apology. You lead without needing followers. Because your path is not about popularity. It's about purpose. And your purpose, it's sacred. You were built for this. Not in arrogance, but in assurance. You're not better than anyone. You're just no longer denying your calling. You've seen too much, felt too much, lost too much, to pretend you don't know who you are anymore. You are a leader of light. You are a guardian of truth. You are a vessel for vision. And this life is no longer about surviving the misunderstanding. It's about celebrating the becoming. From here forward, you honor the vision. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours. You stop negotiating your power. You stop minimizing your gift. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built to hold your brilliance. Because, chosen one, you were never crazy. You were always ahead. You were always years, sometimes lifetimes, ahead of your environment. And that gap between your soul's knowing and the world's recognition was the most painful silence you've ever endured. But now, silence is turning into sound. What was once unspoken is becoming a song. And that song? It's the sound of alignment, of arrival, of awakening. You don't even need to force this season. It's unfolding by design. What used to take years will take months. What used to feel impossible will feel inevitable. This isn't delusion. It's destiny. And you're walking in it. People will ask how you stayed so patient, so strong, so committed. They won't understand how you kept the fire burning when everything around you turned to ash. But they weren't there when you wept alone, when you chose stillness over noise, when you whispered affirmations into the darkness because that was the only light you had. You became the light. And because of that, the universe has no choice but to respond. Everything is bending in your direction now. People, paths, possibilities. Not because you changed the rules, but because you remembered who you are. That remembrance is your revolution. You're not waiting on the world anymore. The world is waiting on you. You're no longer in the phase of proving. You're in the phase of positioning. You don't need validation. You're being summoned. Summoned into places your old self couldn't even imagine. Summoned into conversations that require the wisdom you paid for with your tears. Summoned into timelines where power is no longer a costume. It's a frequency you are. And what's beautiful is that you no longer feel the need to drag anyone with you. You know now, those who are meant to go will recognize the vibration. They'll meet you where you are, not because you begged them to, but because they rose on their own. And those who don't, you bless them and move on. Because you're not here to prove your light. You're here to be it. This is the chapter where you become unshakable, not because life is perfect, but because you are. You've become the version of yourself that doesn't fold under pressure. You bend, you flex, but you don't break. You adjust, you adapt, but you don't abandon your truth. That's the power of alignment. You don't have to fight to be understood. You simply exist in your truth, and what's meant for you arrives, without force, without begging, without fear. Just flow, just frequency, just truth meeting truth in perfect divine timing. This is where your reality catches up to your vision. This is where what you feel becomes what you live. And as it happens, you won't need to convince anyone. Your life will be the confirmation. Your peace, your glow, your energy, your evolution. You'll begin to notice things shift effortlessly. The right people will show up at the right time, saying the right words, opening the right doors. But you won't be surprised, because you knew this moment was coming. You felt it long before anyone saw it. You won't overthink anymore. You'll just respond. You won't over-explain anymore. You'll just express. You won't exhaust yourself trying to be enough. You'll just be, and that will be more than enough. You are now living in the frequency of fulfillment. And fulfillment doesn't mean everything is complete. It means you are finally aligned with what's true. And from that place, nothing is missing. From that place, nothing feels forced. From that place, everything flows. Let the world marvel at how you moved with grace through chaos. Let the world wonder how your joy survived the fire. Let the world whisper your name with awe, because your very presence is a prophecy fulfilled. They will not understand how you carried so much and still stood tall. But that's not your burden to explain. That's your story to embody. So keep going with ease, with fire, with stillness, with clarity. You're not chasing anymore. You're claiming. You're not searching anymore. You're receiving. And it's all happening now. The promises you made to yourself, they're being fulfilled. The visions you held in your spirit, they're being realized. The strength you built in silence, it's becoming your signature. You didn't come this far just to blend in. You came this far to be set apart, to be the standard, to show what it looks like when a soul refuses to settle. Your footsteps are echoing into futures you haven't even touched yet. And still, those futures are responding. That's what happens when someone walks in truth. The universe shifts. You're not the same person they remember. And you shouldn't be. You evolved while they were comfortable. You grew while they watched. You transformed while they hesitated. And now they'll wonder how you did it. But you won't explain, because it was never a formula. It was faith. You followed the whispers. You obeyed the pull. You chose discomfort over complacency. And now, you're living the rewards of radical alignment. This is your era of evidence. You are no longer talking about what's coming. You are what's arrived. There's something sacred about arriving silently. Not with a bang, not with a performance, but with a presence so undeniable it speaks before you say a word. That's you now. Your arrival isn't a scene, it's a shift. People can feel it in the air. Rooms rearrange when you enter. Conversations deepen when you speak. Energy changes, not because you're loud, but because you're aligned. You're not walking in with proof. You are the proof. And the ones who once overlooked you, they're suddenly pausing, questioning, rethinking every moment they doubted your vision. But this time, you don't care. Not out of bitterness, but because you're no longer living for their acknowledgement. You're living for your alignment. And that's more powerful than validation will ever be. You know now, the ones who didn't see you were never meant to hold you. And the ones who mocked your silence didn't understand its purpose. Silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was sacred. It was survival. It was strength. Your stillness built things the noise could never sustain. You were working in dimensions they couldn't perceive, healing wounds they couldn't see, building foundations in realms they don't even know exist. While they posted their highlight reels, you were doing real inner work. And now, that work is visible. The peace on your face, the fire in your walk, the clarity in your voice. That's not luck. That's the reward for showing up. Again and again. Even when no one clapped. Even when no one stayed. Even when no one believed. You stayed. And now, you're standing in the reality you once only dreamed about. Every step forward now is laced with power, because it's no longer driven by fear. It's driven by frequency. You move because it feels right. You say no because it protects your energy. You say yes because your spirit recognizes what's calling you forward. You're no longer at the mercy of trends or timelines. You move by intuition. And that's why life is responding in such beautiful, bold, breathtaking ways. Opportunities aren't knocking anymore, they're recognizing. People aren't guessing anymore, they're remembering. Your presence isn't shocking anymore, it's confirming. You've become the answer you used to pray for. And now, you're living in the space where vision and reality meet. Not perfectly, not without challenge, but with clarity, with confidence, with calm. And that calm, that's your new currency. Nothing shakes you the way it used to. Not because you're numb, but because you're anchored. You've walked through enough storms to know the wind always calms and the sun always returns. You don't panic anymore. You prepare. You don't react. You respond. You don't fear endings. You embrace them because you've realized something profound. The death of one version of you is the birth of another. And in this chapter, you've stopped fearing rebirth. You welcome it. You've outgrown the need to cling to who you were because who you're becoming is so much more grounded, more powerful, more magnetic, more free. You're no longer in survival mode. You're in creation mode. You're not hustling to prove yourself. You're aligning with what's already true. You're not trying to make it happen. You're allowing it to unfold. And in that allowing, you're discovering a life that feels like home. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. You're creating from clarity now. You're loving from wholeness now. You're living from overflow now. And those around you will feel it, not because you tell them, but because they'll sense it. That's the beauty of living in alignment. The energy speaks louder than words ever could. The people who once questioned your path will wonder how you did it. They'll ask for steps, for strategy, for secrets. But you'll know, it wasn't a method. It was a moment. A moment when you chose yourself. A moment when you stopped waiting for permission. A moment when you remembered who you are. And from that moment on, everything changed. You don't need to be in the spotlight to be a light. You don't need millions to know your worth. You don't need external confirmation to feel fulfilled. You are already the thing they're searching for. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you've stopped pretending. And authenticity, that's your elevation. This is the chapter where your name becomes weighty. Not because of fame, but because of frequency. People will mention you in rooms you've never entered. Doors will open because your energy walked in before your body did. You'll get calls, invitations, opportunities, not because you chased them, but because they were already marked with your name. And through it all, you'll remain grounded. Because you remember the darkness, you remember the silence, you remember the fire, and you'll carry that remembrance not as a wound, but as wisdom. Because you were never crazy, you were always ahead. You've reached a space now where you can finally exhale. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is true. The masks are off. The illusions have melted. The striving has stopped. And what remains is you, raw, radiant, real. There's no more pretending, no more shrinking, no more waiting for someone else to say, "You're ready." You know you're ready. You feel it in your bones. You feel it in the stillness. You feel it in the way the world responds to your new frequency. Not with resistance, but with recognition. Because you're not the version of you that once begged for crumbs. You're the version that knows the table was always yours. This is the part where you start walking in the rooms that used to intimidate you and realizing they were never too big. You were just too humble to recognize your own power. But not anymore. You've seen yourself now. You've heard your voice. You've felt the weight of your presence. And you're not turning back. There's no shame in what you've survived. There's no guilt in how long it took. There's only gratitude, deep, sacred gratitude, for the journey that revealed your truth. Every heartbreak taught you how to love yourself deeper. Every delay showed you where your roots really grow. Every no led you to a bigger yes. And now, you're here. You're not just a survivor of the storm. You're the storm itself, reshaping landscapes with every word, every move, every moment of embodied truth. You were built for this. Not in spite of your past, but because of it. The cracks made room for more light. The breaking made room for more strength. The silence made room for more clarity. You're no longer afraid to be seen, because now you're not performing. You're just present, fully, authentically, unapologetically. You've released the pressure to be perfect. You've released the need to be understood by everyone. You've released the pain of being doubted by those who never had the range to grasp your truth. You are free now, and with that freedom comes something even greater: impact. You're no longer just dreaming about shifting the world. You're doing it. With your presence, with your perspective, with your path. You are the blueprint others didn't know they needed. You're walking proof that healing is real, that alignment is possible, that the impossible was just a frequency away. You are leading now, not from a stage, but from embodiment, not by force, but by magnetism, not by proving anything, but by being everything you already are. There's a rhythm to your life now, a divine flow that can't be disrupted, a trust that runs deeper than logic, a knowing that silences all doubt. That's the power of becoming who you were, always meant to be. You don't need the map anymore. You are the map. You don't need the signs. You are the sign. You don't need the approval. You are the authority in your own story. And the world? It's shifting to meet you now, aligning around you, restructuring itself for you. Because when a soul wakes up, the entire universe pays attention. And you're wide awake now. This is your confirmation. The energy you felt for months, the shifts you couldn't explain, the timing that felt too aligned to be coincidence. This is it. You're not preparing anymore. You're present. You're not waiting for the wave. You are the wave, and your ripple is unstoppable. They'll look at your life and see grace, but you'll know it was grit. They'll see elegance, but you'll remember the endurance. They'll see power, but you'll feel the process. And that's what makes you untouchable. You carry both, the glory and the grit, the elegance and the edge, the light and the lessons. You are the integration. And as you move forward, let this be your anchor. You never needed to be understood. You only needed to be authentic. That's your key. That's your currency. That's your crown. So walk boldly, chosen one. The world is shifting because of you. Realities are rising because of you. Paths are clearing for you. This isn't fantasy. This isn't delusion. This is the timeline you were always destined to embody. And through it all, never forget, you were never crazy. You were never broken. You were never behind. You were always ahead. You've made it here, not by accident, not by luck, but by divine design. Every step, every fall, every tear, every awakening, it all brought you to this moment. And now, you're not just walking in your purpose, you are the purpose. You're not just part of the shift, you are the shift. You're not just living the dream, you are the dream realized. This is the final unfolding, the moment when everything within you finally matches everything around you. The moment when the energy you've been carrying quietly for years becomes so loud it moves mountains without your hands. The moment when your past makes sense, your present feels whole, and your future is magnetized with divine certainty. You've crossed over, and now there's no more need to explain. You don't chase understanding. You radiate truth. You don't ask for space. You command it. You don't bend to fit. You expand to transform. You've become the vibration that speaks without words, the frequency that realigns rooms, the presence that disrupts illusions. You're the proof of what happens when someone dares to keep believing, when someone keeps trusting the vision, even when the evidence is missing, when someone chooses love when pain would be easier, when someone chooses alignment, when ego screams for revenge. Your reward is here, not because you earned it, but because you embodied it. You stopped playing the role the world gave you and stepped into the identity you were born with. And now, the heavens have nothing left to withhold. It's not just abundance that's finding you. It's clarity, it's peace, it's partnerships that feel like destiny, it's opportunities that feel like prophecy. It's the kind of blessings that come with your name already written on them in light. And you'll know the difference now between what's forced and what's flowing, between what's meant for you and what's sent to distract, between who's aligned with your frequency and who's merely echoing your past. Because your soul can't be fooled anymore. You see too clearly now. You feel when something is real. You feel when something is yours. You feel when something is divine. So now, you trust it. You don't run. You don't doubt. You don't sabotage the softness you fought so hard to reclaim. You receive. You allow. You breathe. You become. Because becoming is no longer about effort. It's about permission. You've given yourself permission to thrive, to rise, to take up space, to glow so boldly it doesn't matter who wears sunglasses. You're not dimming anymore. You're done apologizing for being powerful, radiant, and free. Let this be your era of embodiment, where what you know becomes what you live, where your light becomes your legacy, where your truth becomes the torch for others still finding their way. Because you are more than chosen. You are proven. And those who once misunderstood you, they'll whisper your name differently now, not in confusion, but in awe, not in judgment, but in reverence, not because you changed who you are, but because you refuse to. That refusal to betray your own soul, that's what built the life you're walking into now. So go, fully, boldly, radiantly. Go where your spirit feels at home. Go where your voice shakes the room with love. Go where your presence opens portals. Go where your power is met, not feared. Because this is your time. This is your season. This is your reward. And every time you look back, let it be with honor, not pain. Because the truth never changed. You were never crazy. You were never broken. You were never too much. You were always ahead. And now, the world finally knows it too.